This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rauda back again with episode 45 of A Geek Leader. And today my guest is Andy Davis. Andy Davis is the host of the podcast Venturi's Voice. He's also the director of marketing at Venturi Group, which is an IT recruitment and placement firm that's located in the UK, Berlin, and New York. And we had a good conversation today as Andy talked about his life, his career, where he started as a startup. He started out working at a startup doing things with Hyperloop, and it was just a very interesting and good conversation. I think you guys will enjoy it and get a lot out of it. So here's Andy. And we're live. I've got Andy Davis with me from across the pond, and I've always wanted to say that on a podcast. I haven't had the opportunity to do that just yet. If you could, Andy, just to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, John. Well, I mean, across the pond is not the most exotic place on the planet, I must say, the north of England. But regardless, it was interesting the first time. I kind of said that as well. But thank you very much for having me on the show. Yeah, I mean, John and I actually, you were on my podcast quite recently. We had an amazing conversation. So, I hope that I kind of live up to the expectation. You certainly set the bar quite high. I feel more pressure this time. I don't know whether you felt that when you were on my show, but I certainly feel a little bit more angst. But just to give a bit of context on me. So, I host the Venturi's Voice podcast. We talk about relatively similar topics, leadership, technology, staffing, those kind of things. And, I do the podcast on behalf of the Venturi Group, which is an IT recruitment agency predominantly based in the UK, but also in New York and Berlin as well. And I'm actually the director of marketing over here. That was it. And, we obviously started the podcast, and I think that's how you and I actually connected.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of episodes over there. What number are you up to now?
I think 250. I don't know exactly, like 200 plus. I think we've done. Yeah, so I hope that I've got better. Is all I can say about that. If practice makes perfect,
you're getting there, huh?
If it ever made any sense, then I hope that I'm getting there. I don't think I'm anywhere near perfect, though. But
perfection is just kind of a mirage, right?
Yeah. Well, people always ask me, because obviously other podcasters and stuff, and I just say, well, I think I just need more practice than most people. I think I'm a trier, So I think that's why we have so many. But yeah, it's been such an amazing experience, and just the ability to connect with so many different fascinating people, just like yourself, John. It's been a really cool ride.
Yeah. So right now you're the director of marketing for a technical recruiting company. Prior to that, how did you get into that role? How did you get into working for recruiting?
So I mean, my background, I suppose it's very, but I started in working for a startup when I was straight out of university. So I think that was an interesting place to start. I kind of only ever worked for startups up until this role. I suppose that's quite different, because I would have thought most people would finish their undergraduate and potentially go and work for a development program for like probably a bigger company, kind of get that formal training, maybe even get some kind of certifications or qualifications, and I would suppose that's probably the kind of traditional way of doing things. And I kind of opted for a different option. My first ever full-time job, I suppose, was for a seed stage startup. There was literally I think 5 of us round this glass table in the middle of an accelerator program. And I think, in hindsight, that was really the main driver of my leadership and I think management philosophies that I kind of carry with me today in a kind of much bigger organization. I think it gets you in good habits, and I think if you can apply those and understand the kind of macros of a bigger company, it can be really useful. So, my background was e-commerce. I worked for a company called Touch Surgery, and then I worked in part on the Hyperloop project, which I think probably is the more famous project that I've worked on. I think Elon Musk originally drew up the white papers for that, and there's I think been several companies now that have kind of pursued it as a alternative transportation method, and then I worked for an app after that in London called Touch Surgery, and we were obviously just driving the growth of that app that's now incredibly successful surgery simulation app. So as far as the products that I've worked for, it's been like incredibly varied, but a lot of the principles, practices have been kind of consistent regardless of what the product is, and I think that's kind of just a testament to my approach and I suppose philosophy on things like on leadership and management, really.
Yeah, the Hyperloop. I remember when shortly after Elon Musk wrote that paper and kind of pushed it out there as this idea, and then he kind of said, "Oh, I'm just going to let it go, let whoever wants to pick it up and start running with this project." And I think there were several startups that kind of jumped on that as an opportunity. Yeah,
it was. There's a few people, and they built those companies out quite interestingly. Everyone had like a different approach. The company I was involved with was HTT, Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, and they kind of like crowdfunded almost the staff, which is like a really interesting way to kind of grow the business without having to like kind of give up a lot of capital initially or like really ramp up the investment round for the resources. So they kind of gave everyone this kind of subsidized equity pool, and you kind of built up your equity share in the business based on the kind of hours that you actually worked, which is just an interesting model on how to kind of grow and scale an idea really quickly. Mm-hmm. But I suppose you can only get away with that if it is the Hyperloop, though. Like if you were trying to sell like toothbrushes, I can't imagine that system will be required.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So I'm sure you don't know this, but I don't think any of my listeners know this actually. My undergraduate degree was in entrepreneurship, and the idea of going to a startup and it's always like a very I don't know, it's a glamorous idea of starting to work at a startup and building the next Facebook or Snapchat or whatever from scratch, and being part of that first 50 employees or whatever, and being part of what's hopefully will be the next PayPal mafia or something like that. And when I go to conferences and I talk to other developers, that's kind of one of these ideas that people always are like, oh wow, that sounds so great. But I'm sure there's another side to that. Can you explain a little bit about what that was like? Really, what it was really like?
Yeah, it wasn't like that at all. I think the reality hits you pretty quick. Admittedly, like I don't think that I ever had that kind of impression that it would be that way. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that is, because I certainly hadn't done as much research in getting involved as I probably would have liked to have think. But it was, the reality of the situation is that you work extremely hard for very, very little reward with regards to like pay. And you're putting all your hopes and dreams on some guy's idea that may or may not work, and there may or may not be a marketplace for. You're also hoping to death that there's some investors out there that'd be interested in throwing money at you, and so you can scale the company really quickly. So the level of uncertainty is massive, and the reward is very little, and the chances of you succeeding is even smaller than that. So if there's ever a poster that's ever going to be big enough, that would be my initial mission statement on working for a startup. But I think that what you gain from it, certainly as like a young person, the lessons that you'll learn are really fascinating. And one of the core messages that I think are, I think most significant in that environment is, you're understanding your value and understanding, how difficult it is to make something work. And it gives you a great appreciation for if you were to ever go and work for a bigger company, or it gives you an appreciation for the hard work that you might need to put in if you were to ever start your own thing up. Because it's not easy to make $1. It's certainly not easy to sell something that's brand new. And if you work for a big company, you have so many resources that you would take for granted that I think you, for obvious reasons, would take for granted if you haven't had an experience like working for a small company. So I think with all that being said, you're not going in there expecting to be the next billionaire, I wouldn't have thought. And I think you have to kind of manage your expectations. I think obviously you need to be ambitious if it's your own startup. But I think you have to manage those expectations. And I think it's a pursuit of knowledge and experiences and learning that you need to really be seeking out for a startup experience, as opposed to the kind of Hollywood blockbuster dream that I think has been perceived, and popularized. And I think that can be problematic when you get people who are complacent, and are certainly problematic for the founder, because they need people who are committed to the cause and are there to learn and just put 110% in. And aren't expecting to get much out of it with regards to financial. You may, obviously, don't get me wrong, there's some people that do incredibly well and those stories do happen, but you can't approach it, from my perspective, thinking about that. You have to approach it from just a learning experience. And I think as the founder, you're very under-resourced, so you expect a lot from people, and I can't give them very much. And I think it's your responsibility, if you're going to go and work for a startup, to understand that before you go in, because otherwise it's just going to be a really bad experience. And I suppose additionally, to add to that, I would just say that you need to be well researched on who you're going to actually work for, because if it is as small as like a seed stage startup like who I worked for, you're not really going to work for the company at that point. You're going to work for the founder or the founders. So you need to know who they are and whether you feel like their background is fully validated, because that's, I suppose, another concern, is working for a startup and not getting given the right information because you're relying on these one or two people. So I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done, and that there's an area where you have to level your expectations. But the pros and the positives and the upside is tremendous, because you learn such a great appreciation. You learn so much. It's like, I always said, it's like an MBA on steroids, going working for a startup. You get the opportunity to wear many hats. You get the great sense of accomplishment, because you are directly impacting outcomes at that point, and you've only just started working for them, and that because you did X, you got the Y outcome. So the outcomes are tremendous. I just think that it needs to be curbed on what those outcomes actually are. And I think that's where maybe there's been some propaganda about what it's like working for a startup that's probably been misplaced, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're right. I actually started, me and two other guys from college, we had our own little startup that we started, and we ran for 7 years. And I had the idea, it was doing web development, web hosting, and a couple of other things, consulting work. And we had this idea that we would be working for ourselves and we would have freedom. But in reality, we weren't our own bosses. We were working for all of our customers, and our customers were our bosses. And it was like, instead of having one boss that you report to, now you've got 50. And the concept of a 40-hour work week was completely foreign to me. It was more like a 70-hour work week.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that. I always try to tell my students when I'm teaching at Winthrop University that it's great to work for a startup, because you learn a lot of values. You learn you get experiences that you're not going to get at a large company. Because a large company, you're going to have like probably a niche job doing one or two things. But at a startup, you're going to have to get your hands dirty everywhere, and you're going to have to work for a lot of things. But understand that you're probably not going to get the benefits and the reward and the some of the things that you'll get from a larger company. But if you're going to work for a startup, it's best to do it early. Do it young. Do it before you have a family and you have a lot of other commitments and you have like a mortgage and other things that will tie you down. Get that experience and get good and early, and who knows, maybe you will be on a company that hits a home run and get out there, but don't work for it for that reason. Yeah. And then after you get that experience and after you've had that, then see where you want to go. If you want to stay the startup route, or if you want to move back into corporate America and build your career there.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think as well, the kind of the core message, and I think there's an interesting, perspective generationally. I would probably account it for. You have now this kind of generation, this emerging generation, and maybe the next generation as well, that are completely motivated and are aware of the marketplace, and they love the concept of, freedom. They love the concept of disruption. They want to work for themselves, that they feel compelled to innovate and all these kind of amazing things. And then you have another generation that are, have been brought up by their parents, who, the way to get out and get into a good situation was to go to school, do what you're told in school, and then go and work for a corporate company and do what you're told, and you'll be really well rewarded by that company. It's the kind of the Henry Fordism, isn't it? The 9 to 5, with go and work for a company, and that's the way that you'll get good grades in school, and that's the way that you're going to go and be able to get everything that you want, a new car every 2 years and a family home and all the rest of it, great pension, whatever. That was kind of the dream of that era. So I feel as though we're in this place where we have a mixture, and there's somewhere in the middle is the kind of compromise, and that's, I think, where we need to get to. And you see it, when I now work for a big company, that you'll see that kind of generational differences are very compelling to watch, because you have one generation, the younger generation, that I think the ugly side of that don't want to listen and want to just go forward, don't believe in patience. They just want to go forward and do things on their own, and they have the kind of the confidence to be able to do that, which is great, but it needs to be managed, right? Then you have the other generation that'll be like, who do they think they are, right? And they're the both ugly sides of each generation if you generalize. And I would say that anyone getting involved in a startup, the likelihood is that you will probably be young. I think that's probably not generalized, and there's probably a lot of truth in that. And I think if you're going to, get involved in that, I think don't assume that you're going to have this amazing idea and it's going to be the best thing ever, because it sounds quite cynical, I suppose, to say, but the chances of you coming up with an original idea in today's age is slim to none. It is slim to none, if anything at all, right? And I think that you need to have those experiences, learn from people, and learn what it feels like to fail, understand, what you're even good at, and then come back to building your own thing once you've been through that kind of experience cycle, maybe even got a little bit of leadership experience, all the rest of it, and then come back to it. There's very, very few people in this world who go straight out of university and build like a huge, massive company. Like it's minute. You can probably actually name most of them. Zuckerbergs and Gates and people like that, right? Yep. So I think for most people, you need to get that kind of concept out of your head. Go into a company with being a sponge, but also being super motivated to do your own thing. So it's kind of I think some of the best practices of what I see to be like a generational thing needs to kind of be synced together. And I think that, I think that would be the ideal scenario. How we go about doing that is probably above my pay grade, but it's certainly something that I would advise from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think a big part of, you said you're probably not going to come up with a new idea. I think you're right. The only thing that you may, what I see anyway, is people, have a different perspective on an old idea, and maybe they market it a little bit different, and that kind of leads me into my next thing, being that you do work in marketing. How do you think people in technology should market themselves? Because one of the things that I see is that a lot of people kind of get into that rut where they have a job, they stick to their job, and their resume and their personal website and their portfolio and their marketing of themselves kind of just falls out the window. And then when it does come to a situation in their career where they do want to switch jobs, maybe they want to leave that startup and go somewhere else, how do they go about, what should they have been doing when they weren't looking for a job to make it easier?
Well, I think, what we're doing now, I think you have to, there's a personal branding element to what you need to do. I think that, there's so much accessibility to networking events online, build means to communicate and connect with people. And, if it's something that is quite a disconnect from what you're doing now, then the reality of the situation is you need to kind of do those projects on the side and show that you're capable of doing them. So I think that's what you can do to kind of best position yourself, is you just have to kind of make the effort from a personal branding perspective. Like I say, it's really basic. It's communication. It's actually executing on what you're saying you're going to be able to do for the next company. At a personal cost potentially. Having to stay later or do bits and pieces from home that aren't the same as your job. If it is that much of a disconnect, I think you have to kind of do that. But I think, if you're working with a recruiter, or you're starting to like build out your CV or your resume, I think the most important thing that I think a lot of people in technology are looking at now is really building out those kind of softer skills. And that's why I really still put an emphasis on going to these networking events, connecting with people, and being a bit more of a social butterfly, which is probably horrible use of language, but
also hard to do for some of us introverts.
Yeah, exactly. Very difficult to do. And no one ever said that it would be easy to do these things. We were talking about this on my show, John. About how hard it was for you to kind of step outside your comfort zone, start a podcast, and push yourself to do that. And the lessons that you learned from that were really significant. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be a podcast, but just something where you're making those kind of extra efforts need to really be at the forefront of what you're working towards, especially within technology, because those are the skills now that are becoming so desirable for people within tech. It's completely changed the tech sphere. We get it all the time from companies that we work with. It's not kind of a checklist anymore of technologies that you can work on. It's far beyond that now. A good analogy for people is, if you're in university now, you're going to, the University of Oregon or wherever, right? You can't just go through that 4 years or 3 years, 4 years and just go to class and then get out now and be on the job market and expect to get the ideal job. You've got to do your internships. You've got to do all this extracurricular activity. And I think those same rules apply in the workplace as well. I think people seem to be really good at doing it at that stage, but then you get into your actual career, and I don't think you apply those same principles. And that's a trend that really needs to be pushed. And for technology, it really is building up those kind of softer skills, because that's paramount. You're very much the product now of a lot of companies. So you have to be able to articulate where you fit into, the commercial side of the business. And I think you have to be able to understand that and try to articulate what problem you're solving and how they kind of impact the bottom line. Things like that are what you really need to gain a fundamental understanding of if you want to stand out from the pack. Because, being an expert in a technology, it doesn't really do it anymore, because technology changed so quickly and different companies may use different technologies. So you can't kind of niche down anymore. That was probably the practices of 20 years ago, where you would kind of this expert at one thing. Now you have to be, you have to have the softer skills, and you have to, have a good fundamental understanding so that it's easy enough for you to move on to different technologies. So they're the things now that companies have shifted towards, as far as what they're interested in from a hiring perspective. So if you're kind of not doing that and you don't have like a genuine, I think, interest in learning, and you're motivated by learning new things, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to compete for those kind of desirable jobs in the future.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and that's one of the things I always tell my students. I teach a senior level class, and before they go out, to work in the field, they usually don't have any experiences, and I always say, do something on your own. Even if you don't want to do your own startup, go volunteer for a nonprofit and build their website for them, or create a customer database for them, or do something that's technical that you can put into your portfolio. And whenever you do have a job and you start to get comfortable, even if you don't want to publicly promote yourself, do it privately. Keep records of the projects you've worked on and build that up so that if that time comes, you have this nice portfolio of work ready to go. But another thing I always encourage them is use LinkedIn. Post some of your successes there. Write articles out on LinkedIn of things that you've succeeded if you don't want to have your own personal blog. But yeah, all that stuff, I think personal branding is extremely important. And I like to equate it to baseball cards. I'm not sure if you're familiar with baseball cards, but when I was a kid, people collected baseball cards and they had this value because it seemed that they were rare. And then eBay came about. And when eBay came about, people could find all the baseball cards they couldn't find in their local market, and it became kind of a larger market. So baseball cards' values just tanked because what we perceived as being rare and hard to find, now they're everywhere. And I think the same thing's true with some developers. When you're looking at a specific skill, let's say a .NET developer, if you're just saying, I need somebody that knows .NET, C#, you can find that anywhere. But what can we say if we're looking for a .NET developer who's worked in specific industries, who has the ability to communicate with an end user, because maybe my company's small, we don't have business analysts, or we don't have someone to gather requirements, and we want someone that has those personal skills and that leadership skill that's out there. Yeah,
totally agree. And Stack Overflow and things like that as well, and
and GitHub, having an active portfolio.
Yeah, being proactive. I just think it's some kind of a minimum requirement now. I think that's what people are really interested in seeing. Because it is becoming competitive for some jobs. Don't get me wrong. Technical people are in high demand. But if you want that kind of job that you really want to pursue, and it's competitive to get it, it's an absolute minimum to be doing all these kind of things, contributing to projects, and like you're saying, the things that are going to get you, I think, above the rest are those kind of softer skills from my perspective at this point.
No, I agree 100%. So coming from a recruiting background, I guess that's what you work now. I've used recruiters in hiring, and I think that it's extremely valuable to help you narrow down. What are some benefits that, let's say, a senior engineer that may be interested in going into management or leadership, what benefits would they have for using a recruiter versus going out and looking for a job themselves?
Well, I think it's, there's a the industry of recruitment has really changed significantly, I think, recently. It's become a kind of a full service industry, and what you need to be asking is to use their resources. For instance, like we invest in, mapping out the marketplace. So we can identify where the best opportunities are going to be, what kind of companies they're going to be. You get instruction on like how to position yourself, your CV, where it's lacking, encouraging you to kind of, work on different projects, as we were just talking about. How your CV looks, how your LinkedIn profile looks. And, obviously the main big part of that as well is giving you like key insights into what the company that you're about to interview with, or the company that you're about to talk with, the things that they really like to hear. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a huge one-up, and the quality of the recruiter is massively important, because if you don't have those kind of insights and they don't prepare you in accordance with what's going to position you in the most appropriate way to get the job, then you are going to struggle comparably if you don't have someone who's going to be helping you. And like you're saying, for me, especially in like something like the contracting world as well, these are people that are going to constantly keep a relationship with you and let you know what opportunities are coming up. Even if you stay with somewhere for 5 years, you should really be leveraging that recruiter to ask them what's happening in the market at the moment, what trends, is there anything I'm missing out on? If you're really leveraging them to the full extent, these are the questions that you need to know, and they should be your kind of insights into the full aspect of the hiring market. So if you ask those questions, you should get answers to them, and the best recruiters are going to give you that information, regardless. So I think these are the kind of things that you really need to be looking at them for, and obviously they're brokers at the end of the day, so they are able to get you in contact with companies and put you to the front of the line at companies that they have, strong relationships with, and also they should be able to, communicate and connect you with companies that you have a big interest in potentially working for. If you were like, I want to work for a fintech company in New York that works on X, Y, Z, then you should be able to go to them and say, look, this is what I want my next move to be. And then they can consult with you over how you need to, create your personal branding, how you need to adjust your resume, all the rest of it. And then behind the closed doors, they're also building those relationships with those companies so that you can actually be kind of put to the front of the line. So I think there's much more available to you now. And I think that there's been a big shift in what can be expected from recruitment companies in recent years. And I think there's probably a few things there that people wouldn't have thought to ask those recruiters about. But I think you really need to just start using them for that and leveraging them for your kind of insights into your particular marketplace.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've kind of discovered, and no one ever told me this, it was never something that a recruiter even told me, is that I feel like you should start building that relationship with a good recruiting company, even when you don't need it. To ask those questions, kind of like what you mentioned. What are the trends in the marketplace today? Should I be learning something, to protect myself in the future? Is there other skills that are in demand right now that I don't have? Even when you're not looking, so that when you are looking, you've got that base, you've built up that experience, and you have good relationship with someone to go to.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really something that I would advise people to do. I think, we love working with people like that. We love working with anyone who's talented, whether you're looking or not. It's that's part of the role. That's part of what I would always encourage people to do, because especially from a cost perspective, it doesn't cost you anything to go and work with these guys, and the amount of information and resources, that you can gain from having a recruiter represent you as a candidate is enormous, and it's certainly advantageous certainly in a competitive marketplace like the world of tech and IT. So yeah, I think it's a great advice. Even get in contact with an agency, do your research on who they are. Obviously, I think our guys are doing some really innovative things and have invested massively in things like this kind of market intel work and all the rest of it. So I think we should always get in contact with us, but also there's plenty of other good ones out there as well. And yeah, it's no cost to you. So I think for me, it seems like a no-brainer, but probably something that people just aren't aware of, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I feel like the same is true also if you're like me and you're in management and you're hiring people. Even when you don't have any openings, go ahead and when recruiters call you and ask and you want to talk to them, find out if they're a good company to work with. I know I've had several that contacted me that wanted to work with me, and a lot of them I've had to say no, because once you do have that opening and you start seeing the resumes come in, if they're not good, a good recruiting company won't send you every resume that they have. They'll send you the ones that they know fit your culture, they fit your personality, they fit the position that they're looking for you to fill. And once you've built that relationship, it's so much easier for them to do that. But it's also better for you because you're not getting resumes that are garbage. You're getting things that are exactly what you need.
Yeah, agreed. I couldn't agree more with that. I think the best recruitment companies are the transparent ones who kind of explain what's going on. Even if they aren't sending you CVs, you want those kind of companies there that are only going to send you what you perceive to be quality. Because if they're sending you stuff that you haven't asked for, then that's really counterproductive. So you want to work with someone who's going to say, look, I'm not, you almost want someone to say to you, look, I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to send you 5 resumes, a week or whatever. But I'm going to, everything that I send you, I will, put my heart and soul into to make sure that it is the right fit. And if that means I can't get one this week, then I'll make sure that I keep in contact with you and let you know on my progress. But as soon as I have someone good, you will see them. And that's the kind of agency you want to work with. Is it someone who's really transparent, with that regard, instead of just trying to prove a point that they can find people. Like that's to me that's a bit of an outdated model.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I wanted to be conscious of your time. I think we've been on for a little while. Is there anything that you want to talk about that I haven't quite gotten to yet that you feel is important for folks trying to build their career up and trying to move into probably a leadership role, either a tech lead or management director position, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably something we could talk about forever, I suppose.
Oh,
but
yeah, definitely.
I think some of the things key points that I would probably like to make are, one is actually a really probably weird one, but it's being vulnerable as a leader. I think is really important. And what I mean by that is, it's okay to be vulnerable and to share failings and to share, when you've messed up with your team. My perspective of leadership is that people think you need to be this kind of cold, hard, driven person who kind of has always got answers for things. And the reality of that situation is that you just don't. We know you don't. And I think it's probably obvious sometimes when you don't, and you're telling your team that you do. Mm-hmm. So I think my take on it as well is if you're kind of allow yourself to be vulnerable around your team and you make it feel like it's a collaborative effort. I feel as though what that allows the rest of your team to do is to behave in the same way. And, it's a much leaner way of working because you fail much faster when you do that and you learn from everything that you've done. So every aspect of what I kind of drill into my team is to be fully transparent. If you fail about something, we want to know, and we don't want it to be kind of, brushed under the rug, because then we're never going to be able to fix it and become better.
Right.
So I think from a leadership perspective, if you act in accordance with that, it makes everyone around you feel comfortable to kind of acknowledge their failings. And therefore, I've found that it's created a much more, I think, productive work environment. And I think also an environment that people just feel in general more comfortable being in. And it all drives from the way that you behave. If as a leader you think you can just go in and say this is what we need, this is what we want, everyone's going to kind of nod along and kind of go away and try and do it. But the reality of the situation is they're not always going to be able to do exactly what you say, and I'm sure they'll try, but they can't. So if you create that environment where there isn't that kind of vulnerability, because people want to try and act and emulate the way you work, which is what they will do. I guarantee that's the way people behave. We've all been taught to behave that way, I suppose, for a long time, even from being children and stuff. So that's what you will get from it. So I think if you can be as transparent as possible and be vulnerable as a leader, I tend to find that just helps a more productive work environment. So I think that's one of the kind of the core ones for me. I think the second one would probably be creating autonomy for everyone who works for me, regardless of how junior or senior they are. I think everyone wants to feel, and I certainly learned this from my startup days, I think everyone wants to feel like they've added, a tremendous value to the team. And they don't want to feel like they've just kind of done a bit for whatever. So if you can give people the sense of autonomy, I think that creates an incredibly engaged team. And, I think as a leader as well, you have to understand that, value and ideas, they come from everywhere. It's almost like the newer people are the better because they have such a fresh perspective and take on things. So whenever I get someone new on my team, I just ask them everything about what they think about what we're doing. Because the information that they have there is just always incredibly valuable, because they haven't kind of been pulled into the bubble yet, in a similar line of thinking. So I think autonomy and, seeking out information as a leader from even your most junior and newest members of the team is just incredibly valuable and something that I see. I don't see many leaders or managers, I suppose, actually doing.
Yeah. Have you read Daniel Pink's book, Drive, by any chance?
No, people keep recommending it to me.
You got to read that. It's he talks a lot about the 3 ways of motivating people. Like, assuming you take money off the table, is that you have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And autonomy could be not just freedom of where you work, how you work, but what you work on. Lots of different things with that. And one of the ways that I've seen with implementing Scrum and different things is it gives your team a little bit of freedom of which tasks or story points which stories they want to go work on. But yeah, autonomy is one of the big things he talks about in that book, and it's so true. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think so. At the end of the day, people are people. I think if you treat them that way, people want to feel like they've done well. People want to feel like they've added value to something. That's just people. I think if you kind of steer away from treating people like people, you're not going to get the best out of people. So,
I think a lot of people forget that employees are people too.
Yeah. I think it's easy to do that. I suppose I understand it. When you're constantly doing reports, like I have to do a lot of reporting and present it to the board and all this kind of stuff. Everything's kind of drilled down to numbers. And that's obviously all good and well. You need to do that, but you have to be able to kind of compartmentalize them and understand the substance of what puts those numbers on the board. And it's not numbers. It's not telling people about numbers and telling them to do numbers that puts numbers on the board. It's it's working with them in a way that's going to create an environment that they feel comfortable and therefore enjoy. And my take has always been, if I have people on my team that are enjoying the work that they're doing, they always are the most productive. That's, for me, as simple as the philosophy as I could give.
Yeah, that sounds good. So how can people learn more about your show and find out more about some of the things that you guys are doing over there?
Yeah, so I mean, company website is just Venturi, Venturi -group.com. That's the website, and you can find the podcast on there as well. The podcast is Venturi's Voice. We're also on iTunes, but yeah, you can find all the material for what we write. We have a blog and a podcast, all on the Venturi Group website, and that's probably the best way to connect with us. And you can see a lot of our team on there, and you can connect with us directly if you have any kind of job requirements, or you have you're looking for a new job, or just want to connect with one of our recruiters and get some market insights in general. That's the best place where you'll be able to kind of get all of our resources for.
Yeah, and definitely go out there and check out the episode with me.
Yeah, and the episode with John should be released pretty soon, so we'll certainly get that up and running pretty quick. It was a really cool chat, so I'm looking forward to getting that one out there. Yeah.
Well, it's been good having you. I appreciate it.
No worries, John. Well, thank you for the time, man. Appreciate the chat. Hope I didn't bore everyone to death, I suppose.
No, it was great. Thanks so much.